everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by none other than Mr. Gary Lee. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Nathan?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast. So to give a bit of background on you, you had a storied, high school career. You graduated in 2015 as the valedictorian, and you were also the president of the student council that year. You then went on to study at the prestigious Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, which is in Philadelphia. You graduated with an economics degree, but you majored in finance and management. You're now working in New York City, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But I guess, for someone who has accomplished so much, what did it really mean to you to represent, the student body as valedictorian and president in that year?
What did it mean to me? Wow. Well, first of all, thanks for kind of like giving me the opportunity to go down memory lane on this podcast, and you're doing awesome work. So honestly, keep it up. It was really awesome. Like, I think just having people entrusting me to kind of like represent them on student council and their like what they want to see, what they envision for their high school experience. That's a huge honor. And I remember taking that role pretty seriously. Like at the end of the day, extracurriculars are extracurriculars, so they're meant to be fun. But I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to kind of make sure I was representing students well and hearing their opinions out. But it was a huge honor, and also being valedictorian was like an awesome experience too. Feel super blessed to have been able to like speak at graduation and basically be the voice of the students one last time. So both like super awesome experiences.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like any other experiences that we didn't mention yet that were valuable to you during your high school years?
There were a ton of experiences. Like student council was my biggest commitment, but I also spent a ton of time in like music. So I was like in wind ensemble and band and music council, and I also spent time like doing DECA, which is a pretty formative experience for me and kind of like getting my feet wet in business and ultimately making a pursuit into studying business in undergrad. Yeah, like a couple of different experiences. And then also, I don't know if it still happens, but I and a couple of friends, we used to have this thing called Trudeau. I forgot what it was called exactly, but it's like a camp. It's like a leadership camp, an overnight camp, and it ended one year. And then a couple of friends and I wanted to revive it, so we just picked it back up. That was pretty formative too. Super, super awesome. Doing that like overnight leadership camp for students. So a ton of awesome experiences from PET. Yeah.
Was it called Create?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's a big thing that a lot of kids do.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah. What are some standout moments for you? What did you learn from that experience?
Oh man, I think the biggest thing I learned from that was you can really do anything if you put your mind to it. Basically, the predecessor to Create was like this kind of like same format, but I can't remember for what reasons exactly. Unfortunately, it couldn't run for one of the years, and a couple of friends and I who had experienced it before were super sad about that because it was such a great opportunity to like meet other student leaders across the school and meet people in different years as well. And we wanted to bring it back. And so it really was like this thing that we built from the bottom up. I remember us going to teachers to ask if they could be our like advisors. And then I remember speaking with the principal to ask for funding and like going to campsites, like visiting them to figure out what the right place was. So honestly, like it was hard work, but it definitely showed me that if you believe in something, you can do it. You just got to put your mind to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super valuable. That's kind of, I guess a seed of, project planning, like kind of getting into business a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
You mentioned getting your feet wet into business with DECA before. At what point did you really know that business is something that you wanted to pursue?
Good question. Trying to think. When I was in high school, I I knew I didn't want to do like engineering. Like I could do sciences, I could do math, but I knew it took a lot more effort out of me than some other subjects like the business stuff, communication, like English, languages, all of that felt a lot more like in my wheelhouse. Um, and when I did DECA, I think a lot of things when I did DECA just kind of clicked for me. Um, like having to do a case where you're trying to explain your idea and you're trying to bring other people on and convince them and thinking about like the business rationale for what you're doing, like doing those deca cases over and over again really like trained me to think that way. And I also think there was a certain intuition there that helped as well. So um the first time I competed though was actually in grade 11. um so I only started halfway through my like high school career, but it was so fun and I remember spending like so much time preparing for it and then going to regionals that went well, and then going to provincials, that was super fun, and then getting to go to like ICDC, which is like the international competition. That's what I like thought to myself, like I could maybe explore this after high school. Like this is actually pretty interesting, and I'm pretty good at it. So I'd say like probably DECA was the thing that made me really think about business or like a potential career path or something to study in college. But I did explore other things too, just not like the engineering stuff. That that's not for me.
Yeah. So once you knew that you wanted to go into business, I guess, the next step was to pick a school. And obviously you went, to the States to study. What was that decision process like? What other schools did you consider? What was the application process like?
Yeah. Oh my God. Like thinking back to when I was applying was actually so stressful because I you remember uh like I knew I wanted to go to a strong business program. And I knew there were strong business programs in Canada and in the States. So I was considering both. Um, for example, like Ivy, like where you're at, and like Smith, or back then it was called like Queen's Com. I forgot what it's called, like
Mhm,
Queen's Commerce. Yeah.
mhm,
Um, but I had my eyes set on Wharton because I knew it would be a great education. Like a lot of wonderful, very smart, very competent business people have come out of that program. Well, let me tell you, applying for it was really it was so stressful because you have to take like the SATs, you have to get three teacher recommendations, you have to write like two essays, and then you have to fill out the application, which is like all about your grades and your like why you kind of statements and background information. And I remember submitting the application when there were like 7 minutes left before the deadline, which I really like. For anybody out there considering just applying to anything, you really shouldn't do that. That was like so stressful, and it didn't have to be so last minute, but I was just trying to like perfect my essays. Um, but yeah, I remember the application being really, really stressful. But I also considered other business programs, like I mentioned, like Western Ivy and Queen's Commerce. But I just wanted to kind of like take a shot in the dark and see if I could like shoot for the stars, and that's really why I ended up applying to Wharton. And yeah, it kind of worked out for me, which I say is a lot of luck, um, a lot of luck and being prepared. I think that's when you set yourself up for success, is when preparedness meets luck.
mhm. So, extending that farther, you touched on being prepared, and then you also, gave a bit of advice, don't leave it to the last moment. Do you have any like other piece of advice for anyone watching?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So definitely, if it's important, don't start last minute. Do not start last minute. I was like scrambling to get the like SATs done in time and like give my teachers enough time to write the recs. And then also the second thing I said was like being prepared plus luck is where true like success comes, I think. You never know when luck is going to come, so you always need to be prepared. Um, and then like I would say like bet on yourself. Like I have a lot of self-doubt. Um, and that might not necessarily come across to every person that I meet, but I think like my friends really know that. They can see that. And I think I've come a really long way in talking to myself in a much more kind way, in a much more encouraging way, and thinking about like the things I say to myself, I would never say to a friend. So why beat myself up like that? So you really want to like be your own biggest advocate, you're like your own cheerleader. Like I really believe in that. I think one last thing that really comes to mind is just like look after your mental health. Um, that theme for me didn't really come through until I went to Penn. Um, because I think in high school I was just like grinding really hard, like doing all these classes and extracurriculars, and it didn't leave a lot of time to really think about how I was feeling, how mental health was. And it wasn't until college when it all kind of like came and I really have to like stop and think about it and take care of my mental health. So I think first and foremost, above all, like it's great to work hard. It's great to like, do all these different things, but you really have to take care of your mental health. I think that's the most important
Mhm.
part.
Yeah, thank you for those tips. Those are, applicable for, anyone in any field. So those are, very valuable. I totally agree with that. You mentioned your teacher recommendations, without giving us, the names exactly. What's it kind of like? How would you kind of like build, a personal brand in class so that like someone could speak on you? What are some things that you found valuable in like finding these, teacher connections?
Yeah. I think just seeing your teachers as people, I think is huge. Like these are real people that have lives outside of the classroom, they have families. And I think seeing them as people who also have good days and bad days and also have aspirations and like challenges, humanizing them really makes like I think it helped me connect with my teachers more. Like I really made an effort to get to know them outside the classroom. Um, I mentioned spending time in like music department. Um, like I was pretty close with um, like the music that like the teachers, like Mr. Colley and Mr. Rollins, and I think getting to know them outside the classroom really helped, and just like seeing them as people. I remember having a pretty like tough time in grade 10, and I remember Mr. Colley like pulling me aside and being like, what's up? You're not like yourself." And I had a pretty serious heart to heart with him, and I think having those kinds of conversations helped really build that trust with him. And that's just like one example of the teachers that have really been there for me. Um, yeah, like I think being authentic and just like seeing teachers as real people really helped me connect with them, and I guess that's part of building a brand, which is just being authentic, like having that human connection with people. Um, and so I think like that really helped when it came time to asking them for recommendations. Like they saw a side of me that was beyond what they saw in like the classroom, and that really helped. Shout out to them. Also, shout out to Madame D'Angelo. She was my French teacher for 2 years. Um, she also was super awesome. Like, really helped me through that process, but also outside of the classroom. Really appreciate those teachers in particular.
Mhm. If you were to write, a recommendation for yourself, you mentioned authentic. What would some other words that you pride yourself on be?
Oh man, um, it's so weird to like reflect on yourself in this way, but I would say thoughtful, intentional, and just hardworking. I will say though, I think thoughtful, I don't know if I would have said that about myself back in high school. I think
Mhm.
in high school, my general approach was to just like go all out in everything and see what sticks, which is one way of exploring like what classes you like and exploring like what you're good at. But it also takes a lot of your time and like energy to do that in the classroom, outside the classroom. But I think I've been a pretty hardworking person, and I think that has helped me be the prepared person that has really helped me in times of like when I've been lucky, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I'd say I'm a lot more thoughtful now. Back then, I was a bit more like all over the place, which I still
Mhm.
kind of am,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit better at that now.
Mhm. Yeah. So, you touched on like personal growth. You said you wouldn't have described yourself as that, in high school. And then you kind of alluded to your transition, moving to the States. Yeah. Was there like a culture shock at first? What was kind of like your first impression, studying abroad?
Oh my gosh, yeah, there was totally a culture shock. The Asian food in Philly does not compare. Honestly, it's so good. I don't realize I like didn't realize how good I had it in like the GTA until I left.
Mhm.
And Chinatown in Philly is pretty awesome, but it honestly doesn't compare. Um, Especially the dim sum. The dim sum's okay in Philly, but the dim sum in like Toronto is so good,
Yeah.
so good. Um, there was a real culture shock though. Like Philly is, it's a tough city. It's the nickname is the city of brotherly love. And I do feel the love there in the sense that it's very historical, and like you can definitely find pockets of communities in the city that are like super cool. And but yeah, like I feel like Philly almost like toughened me up a little bit, which I kind of needed. Um, it's hard to explain. Um, Also, I think like being in a different country was a learning experience. I mean, granted, it's like not that far. It's closer to go like from Markham to Philly than it is from Markham to Vancouver.
Mhm.
Um, so geographically, it's not that far, but I was still an international student, and I think I really resonated with other international students. Some of my closest friends, still to this day from Penn, are also international students. And just adapting to being like thinking yourself as like an outsider was something I kind of had to get over. It was like a mental hurdle. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm curious, as a business student, what was kind of the breakdown of, group projects, exams, like what did that kind of look like for you?
Yeah. I think it's pretty similar to kind of like your experience and like Canadian students. Um, my schedule was it was like 4 or 5 classes per semester, 2 semesters per year, and Penn brands itself as being a liberal arts education, but still with like professional technical training. So half of my coursework was in Wharton, so it was like business focused, so like finance, management, um, marketing, operations, all that good stuff. But then the other half of my coursework was outside of Wharton. So I was taking classes like social impact. I took like an acting class, which was pretty cool. Um, I took like psychology. I took like the sciences. I took the least. I said before, I'm not really like an engineering. I can do that like the
Mhm.
sciences, but I definitely it's not my like forte. It's not like my favorite thing.
Mhm.
So I took like the least sciencey of the science courses. But like one of the science courses to fulfill my requirement was called becoming human, and the whole class was just about like it's more like anthropology than hard sciences. And I just remember my professor would spend half of each class just talking about rabbits and like how much she loved rabbits. And one time she like caught a rabbit and then it like died in her hands and she got really sad while she was like lecturing. Um, I don't know why that memory just like stands out in my head so well. But yeah, so like half of the coursework was outside of Wharton, super awesome, like trying different things. And then the other half of the coursework was in Wharton. And then the Wharton classes were very um, case heavy, a lot
Mhm.
of cases, which I think is the same experience at Ivy,
Mhm.
as so far
Mhm.
I've heard, right? Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
like you've read a case and then you come prepared to class, and then sometimes you're cold called, and if you haven't read it beforehand, you pray to God that you're not cold called.
Mhm.
Oh my God, I remember so many classes where I'm like, please don't call me, please don't call me.
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was pretty fruitful,
Mhm.
kind of like academic experience.
Mhm. So, you touched on, your finance courses, your management courses, and you decided to major in finance and management.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, we talked a little bit offline about, how you decided to come up on that. And now you're not working in finance and management, but at the time that was what you decided to pursue. Kind of walk us through like that decision process for you.
Yeah, totally. So, well, first of all, I chose to major in finance and management because when I was looking through the curriculum, like when I was picking classes, they just were the most interesting classes to me. Like for example, in finance, I remember taking these capital markets classes at Penn, at Wharton, that were super interesting. And it reminded me of like when I took capital markets in high school with like Mr. Shields, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, like the coursework was really interesting, and then the management coursework was also really interesting because the finance coursework was much more, I would say, quantitative, very like technical, and then the management courses were much more soft skills, and I liked having the balance. So like in the management side, I took courses on negotiations. That was like one of my favorite courses. I took classes in like management in like social impact, um, and then like business strategy. So just because of like the courses that were available to me, I settled on those two concentrations. Now, when it was my sophomore summer, I did an internship in Hong Kong with a Penn alum, and it was like a startup. It was super cool. And in that internship, I got to know the startup founder a lot more. And I think in those conversations, I kind of mm, was deciding between going into consulting or going into finance. And when I started recruiting, when I came back to Penn in the fall, I chose to recruit for finance internships for my following summer because, like I said, I was really interested in the finance courses, and I wanted to give finance a test run for that summer before deciding on it as a full time career after I graduated. So I recruited for finance internships, and then I landed one at an asset management firm. And so the following summer, in my junior year, I did a finance internship there, in New York City, and I had a ton of fun, super fun. I got to meet like these amazing people from other schools and got to learn a lot more about the investment industry. And I was like, I could do this. Like as a full time job, I could do this. So um, thankfully, they extended a full time offer, and I signed it. And then yeah, I started my career in finance, and it was a good learning experience. I will say, like the internship is sort of representative of the real experience, and it's sort of not. Like
Mhm.
like during the internship, they put you on projects that are supposed to kind of give you a taste of what you do on the real job. But I found when I actually joined in the real job that unsurprisingly, it was a lot more stressful, and you face a lot more um I would say like you're much more accountable for your work. There's
Mhm.
fewer layers of responsibility and people reviewing your work before it gets to the client. So that was stressful. Um, but those like 3 years in finance definitely trained to me in a lot of ways. Like it taught me to really prioritize. It taught me to how do you address client pushback, or like clients being unhappy, which is not fun, but is a really important like life skill. Um, and then it also just taught me more about the investment landscape, which I thought was a great like learning experience. Super interesting.
Mhm. So after that, you're working in operations and strategy for a company
Mhm.
called ZocDoc. Would you mind telling us more about what the company does and more specifically what you do?
Yeah. So I transitioned to ZocDoc after 3 years in finance because I was ready for a lifestyle change. Like working in finance is long hours.
Mhm.
It is really stressful. It's long hours, and you kind of give up some degree of control over your time, including your weekends. So I was ready for like a change of pace. Um, and I had a friend who still works at ZocDoc and helped me like with referral and told me about like the company and the job. And I was like, this could be a really good fit for my skill set and what I want to do next because basically what strategy and ops, like what that role is. Another name for it is like business operations, biz ops. What you're doing is twofold. One is you're developing strategy. So that might mean setting revenue targets for the business unit and then figuring out how you actually get there. Like what projects need to do to get to that revenue target. And then the other half of the work is operations. So implementation of the strategy and making like day-to-day changes to the business to make it run just a little bit smoother. It's a really interesting combination of both quantitative, like digging into the data to figure out what's working in the business and what's not, and then also like the qualitative, which is um, working with cross-functional stakeholders to execute your projects and to convince them um, that you should like do things a certain way. And I felt like I had developed that skill set in my days in finance. So I applied and I got through and got the offer, and it's been a really good experience so far. It has its tough days as well, but it's tough in a
Mhm.
different way. Like
Mhm.
it's never tough in terms of long hours, but it is tough in terms of like I feel like it's more the results are more immediate. So when I was in finance, you would do analyses and then you deliver it to the client, and sometimes they would implement, sometimes they wouldn't implement your ideas.
Mhm. Yeah.
In this role in strategy and operations, like you're directly responsible for the business. So you can make a change. Like you could change the client segments that we target. And then you could see in a week if there was an uptick in revenue. And if there's an uptick, great. If not, then you're on the hook for explaining why that is
Yeah.
to the higher ups, which can be stressful. So it's like stressful in a different way, but fun
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, what I gained is that ZocDoc is like a healthcare tech
Yeah.
kind of like they like connect patients and doctors? Is that kind
Yeah,
of how it works?
I should have talked about what.
Yeah.
So ZocDoc, a health tech company, and you're spot on. Basically, what we do is we make it easier for patients to find doctors. So we're like an online booking platform. So we have providers on our database, and then you, as an everyday consumer, go on it and maybe you want to book an appointment with a dentist. So you look up dentists in New York, and then we show you a bunch of dentists, and then based on ratings and reviews, you pick the dentist that you want to go see. It is surprisingly hard to find doctors in America. The healthcare system is a little wonky,
Yeah.
so what we're trying to do is to make that experience easier for patients to find the care that they need.
Okay. Yeah. No, the American healthcare system is a whole other conversation. We won't get
It
into that
is.
today.
Oh my God, it is. Yeah. My sister, she also lives in New York City, and she's a doctor on ZocDoc as well. And she and she's always telling me like, oh, like can you change this thing on ZocDoc, or like, oh, why is it so expensive? And like it's not, I don't own the company. I just am part of helping it run better. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry. But it's cool. Yeah, it's a fun experience.
Mhm. So do doctors pay to be on the platform and then
They do.
patients have to pay
Yes.
to find?
Patients don't pay
Okay.
to find a doctor, but doctors pay to be on our platform. Yeah.
Okay, fair. And then, wrapping up, what are some future aspirations you have? You mentioned, reporting to higher ups. You mentioned that you don't own the company. Are those, things you want to work towards? Maybe further education?
Yeah, I want to kind of keep developing my skill set and eventually be a people manager. I've had some really awesome mentors throughout my career, throughout the last 4 years and change, and I want to do the same thing for other people in a managerial capacity. Um, and I I think I would love to stay in a similar role like this, like a strategy and operations role. I think it's super fun, but I also haven't closed the door on finance completely yet. There's also stuff that I miss about working in finance, the intellectual side of it. And yeah, who knows? Maybe one day I'll go back. But for now, the ride is pretty fun at ZocDoc, so I'm sticking with it.
Do you see yourself always in New York City, or would you consider, you mentioned you worked in Hong Kong. Like, do you have any inclination on where you want to be?
Yeah, I see myself in New York City for at least the next 5 years. Yeah. Um, I could see myself potentially moving, but like New York City is so much fun. There's so many things to do. Like it was like Lunar New Year recently, and like there's stuff happening in Chinatown. There's actually multiple Chinatowns in New York. There's like the Manhattan one, there's like the Brooklyn one, there's like a Queens one, and there's like tons of stuff happening in the city. So many museums, so many restaurants, so many parks, so many dogs. There's like dogs everywhere in the city, which is kind of crazy for how crowded and cramped the city is. But I love the energy in the city. It's so much fun, and yeah, I could see myself being here for a few more years, and then after that, we'll see. But I think I'll be in a city for at least like the next 10, maybe 20 years of my life.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep track of that, and we'd love to see you succeed and all that. Final question for you. If you could nominate any number of tech grads to be on this podcast, who would it be?
There's so many like people that I could think of, like so many awesome Penn alum. I'll name my sister for one. She graduated. She's like 4 years older than me, so she's old. And I can say that.
More experienced.
She's more experienced, sure.
Yeah,
That's
what
what she prefers.
Yeah.
The sister, shout out to Vivian. I will give a shout out to Cindy Young. She and I performed at Cabaret a few times. And shout out to Jade Brown. She and I have stayed in touch since our high school days, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's so many people I can name, but I think I'll keep it to those three for now.
Okay, thank you so much. Do you have any, closing words of advice, wisdom, anything?
Well, to you, Nathan, I would say like honestly, keep it up. This is super awesome.
Thank you.
And super interesting. Like it's been awesome listening to what other PETH alumni have been up to. So that's been awesome. And yeah, I would say like if anybody out there is interested in talking about like Penn, going to school in the States, or working in finance or strategy and ops, or interested in moving to like New York one day, like feel free to reach out. More than happy to talk. And yeah, I think one last message is what I said earlier, which is honestly like really prioritize your mental health. I think that's so important. I really think it's so important to protect your mental well-being, because health is wealth and it's priceless. So yeah, that's all I'd say.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on here and all the insights that you gave. And thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week.